So next up, we'll take a look at some helper classes, some nice utilities that we can use to align our content. So a couple things up front. One, remember our flexbox. We talked about flexbox and terms like align content, or align items, rather, justify content. Look at me, mixing it up already. Those are actually used in Bootstrap. Bootstrap uses Flexbox terminology because it's actually built on top of Flexbox. So you'll see what I mean. But let's actually get something to align. Right now, I've made 4 new columns, equally sized columns in this single row. These weren't here in the last video. And they're all just lorem ipsum. They're exactly the same height. But I'm going to make one of them twice the height, maybe the success one. I'm just going to do another lorem. All right, so now we've got some extra space. And you'll see that they're all growing to take up that same height as this green box. But maybe that's not what I want. Maybe I want, all of the other ones to be aligned to the top and to not stretch to take up that whole height. Or maybe I want them to be centered, or I want them to be aligned to the bottom. Well, fortunately, we have these classes we can use: align-items-start, center, end. These are all different options that we can apply to vertically align our content. So think back to Flexbox, how align items works. It works on the cross axis, and our grid is built using Flexbox already. If I inspect it, you'll actually see that row, the class equals row, has display set to flex. So I didn't do that. That's just from the class of row. So I could manually go in and set the actual CSS that says, align items center or align items start or something. Or I can use the Flexbox helpers. So that's what I'm going to do. I just need to find that. Where are you? Here we are. I'm going to find the row and set align items, how about end? And there we go. That content is aligned along the cross axis at the end. So top to bottom, so it's aligned at the bottom. Or I could do start. There we go. Or I can do center. And center is actually used pretty frequently. If you have especially content that is not exactly the same size, maybe you're making like a product card. You may have seen that before, where there's like 3 subscription choices and there's information about each one. We can center align them together. So if I made one of these even larger, how about this one here? Lorem times 2. There we go. Center aligned. Looks decent enough for what it is, which is basically nothing. Just lorem ipsum text and random background colors. So that's align items. Just like in Flexbox, plain old non-bootstrap Flexbox, we can also control the alignment of a single column using align self. So we have align self start, center, and end. So I'll just show that briefly. Why don't we align the blue one to the end? So let's find you right there. Align self end. And just to reiterate what's happening behind the scenes, if we look at it, it has align self set to flex end. So we could do that on our own, just like we could do all of this on our own, but the point of Bootstrap is to simplify that process. So this is why I taught Flexbox first. Otherwise, this terminology is kind of confusing if you don't know what align self or justify content is. Speaking of justify content, we have a set of utility classes: justify content, start, center, end, around, between, that we can use to control the horizontal spacing. So right now, there's not a lot for me to control here because these are actually taking up 100% of the space. But let's do something slightly different. Let's make another row. So I'll do an H3, justify content, and then I'll add a row. And then in here, let's do a column that takes up, how about, 4 units, okay? And we'll give it a background color, BG info. No, let's do primary. And then just lorem ipsum. I know it's boring, but it gives us something nice and easy to work with. Okay? So right now I have a lot of extra space. I can actually add a border to my row. Bootstrap gives us a class called border, and it looks like this. It's not terribly impressive. You can see all that extra space. And I could add one more in, right? I'll just duplicate this. Where are you? Right here. We have primary. Let's do info. Okay. So we've got this extra space, and the default is that our elements are just aligned to the start of the main axis, just at the left side of our row. But if I wanted them to instead move to the right or to split that space between them, I have justify content helper classes. So justify content start, it's already what's happening. Let's do center. So this is on the row. justify content center. Okay, they're centered. Justify content end. There we go. Between. And just like with align items, this is just adding regular old Flexbox properties that we already know. It's just an easier way of doing it. We don't have to touch our style sheet, right? We haven't written anything. I have an empty app.css. It's still not pretty, but we're laying things out without having to touch CSS. You just have to use the right classes. Now, what I haven't told you yet is that all of these utility classes actually have different variants for different screen sizes or different breakpoints. So justify content is not just justify content start, but we could also specify that we want start on small and above, and then we want center from large and above, and from extra large and above, we want justify content around. So there's all these variants that we can use, because sometimes it's not enough just to say, I want this to be centered always. You might want to dynamically change that depending on the size of the screen. So I'm not going to show a ton of examples here, but I'll just demonstrate this. And the same applies for align self, for align items. All of these have these different breakpoint variants. So let's take a look at what we have right now for justify content, these two. Right now I'm using space between. So I'll start by giving them, how about column medium 4, so that on smaller screens, they just stack in a column. Okay, but then we get here, and maybe I want them to start centered. I don't want them to have space between. So I can start with justify content center. And this is going to be from all sizes, extra small and above. So they're centered. Now it doesn't matter here when they're stacked, there's no space to distribute, but here we do have, nope, not yet. Here we have space. Now, maybe I want them to move to the left or space between or space around at the large breakpoint. So let's do left, sure. So justify content, and then I can specify the breakpoint. So I'm going to do large, and then start. So large and above, I want them to move to the left side or the start, flex start. And then once we get to extra large, I'll go for space between. So these get kind of long. Justify dash content dash XL dash between. There we go. So they start out. There's no space, no horizontal space to worry about. Then we start by centering them right there at medium and above. And then from large and above, they go to the left, flex start, and then extra large and above, space between. So the same thing holds true for the other utilities for alignment, for align self and for align items. They all have these variants where you can specify different versions at different breakpoints or different sizes. So they're not all that commonly used, but there might be times where you need to redistribute that space depending on the size. So that's pretty much it for the grid at this point. There's a lot to it. But you'll get a lot of practice, and we'll build some more layouts, we'll build some projects and that sort of thing. So you'll get more comfortable, hopefully.